Hi, I'm Rob Simpson, and I work over in the astrophysics department in Oxford here. And I work as part of the group called the Zooniverse, and we build crowdsourcing citizen science projects. So we get people to look through data and help us to analyze it, and we do that with lots of groups around the world to get their research done. And so our interest in all of this is about the crowd working with us and us using their knowledge and crowdsourcing their efforts to do science. So it's a very interesting set of talks. This is the second, I think, in a sequence of talks. There isn't one next week, I believe, but they do continue after that. And there is a leaflet you can pick up on the way out, just outside the door, that tells you about the other two that are coming up. And they've all got this thread through them about getting lots of people to help you and to enjoy helping you do, which is certainly what we like to do. But very happy to introduce on a topic I am super interested in, Dr. Philippa Law, who works with GuardianWitness, which has been running for just over a year, or just about a year, I think, doing a sort of structured crowdsourcing of journalism, not just asking for everything through the floodgates that anyone's ever taken a picture of or photographed or written about, but trying to do it in a constructive way. And so this is super interesting for me. Journalism is one of my main interests. Not that I'm a journalist by any means. And so I think this should be a really good talk. So thank you for coming. Please turn off your phones, just in case they're on. It's just a quick reminder about that. And also to remind you that we are being live streamed onto the internet to the crowd, who may, be part of this as well. So if you ask any questions at the end, that will be on the feed, just to remind you of that. But without further ado, I shall turn it over to Dr. Philippa Law.
Hiya. So, my name is Philippa, and I work at The Guardian on a project called GuardianWitness, as Rob said. Can I get an idea of who I'm talking to? Who here has got an interest in science or is a scientist? So, yeah, science. Who's into science? So, about half of you. Who's got an interest in journalism or is a journalist? About the other half. And who has worked with crowdsourcing or citizen science or anything like that at all? A handful of you. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So, GuardianWitness is part of the Guardian's open journalism strategy. I don't know if anyone's heard of this. If you've seen adverts a couple of years ago on TV for The Guardian, we had 3 little pigs in it. That was all about open journalism. The idea that our journalists don't necessarily know what's best. Just because they're good at curating information and checking information, it doesn't necessarily mean that they know everything about everything in the world. Our readers, we expect to know a lot more about certain topics than we do. And it might be because they have a specialist interest or a specialist knowledge through their work, or it might be because of their personal experience. And so the idea of open journalism is that we draw on the knowledge and understanding and experiences and just even the different locations of our readers in order to improve our journalism, and not just in news, but across lots and lots of different sorts of editorial output that we make. And my job as a community coordinator is partly to enrich the Guardian's journalism by drawing on our readers, but also to build and nurture communities of audiences around the world, around different interest groups, but around different interests, different parts of our content, either so that we can go back to those people and ask them more questions, or just to kind of have a sense of engagement and community around our content that builds loyalty and that kind of thing. And also just because it's nice. It's quite nice to have people, talking to each other and enjoying what you do. So, open journalism, or audience participation, or whatever you want to call it, it's something that's been around for a long time. It's not a new thing, just because of the internet and all of that kind of thing. We've had a letters page forever, as far as I know. Don't quote me on that, I don't know when it started. We have comment threads on the website, so on a lot of news stories we'll have, comment on this article, and people can add a comment at the bottom, and that's for people's opinions, discussing points, arguing about things, making corrections. One really lovely thing that we do on the Guardian website is the data blog, where the data journalists will say, can you see something different in this data, or how would you interpret this differently? And then the readers who have a better knowledge of that particular issue will comment something, and the data bloggers can follow that up further. And we also do question and answer sessions with experts, online chats. In the past, and less so now, we have Flickr groups, so people who have particular interest in photography might be part of a group on Flickr that we've set up. We've had meetups where we've got readers together to discuss things or just to hang out. And then, as Rob said, last year we launched GuardianWitness, which doesn't replace all of these things, it complements them, but it's a streamlined, centralised, systematic way of being able to gather photos, videos and text contributions from readers on the topics that we're interested in getting. And what we found works best with GuardianWitness is not the things that work in comments, so things like opinion and discussion, but personal experiences and individual perspectives, whether that's through taking a photo of something that's local to you or something that you've spotted, or whether it's your own personal experience of something that's happened to you. I was going to mention the other words that we use sometimes just to kind of differentiate the way we talk about it. So open journalism is kind of our Guardian phrase. We use the phrase user-generated content, or UGC, a lot, which is something that a user, a website user, so a reader, has contributed to us that they've created themselves, whether that's a piece of writing, a piece of text, a photo, a video. It doesn't have to be fully formed, but something that they've given to us for the purpose of editorial stuff. We use the phrase crowdsourcing to think about getting lots of individual little pieces of data. That's how we think about it. Or to do lots of little tasks that all add up to one big thing. But that's something that we can't do through GuardianWitness, really. Only in a kind of metaphorical. And what we do is analogous to crowdsourcing in that we're asking a lot of people about similar things, but we don't get structured data through GuardianWitness. And citizen journalism, when we use that phrase, we're thinking more about readers who have done the work of journalism themselves. They found something out, they've checked it out, they've written it up. It's as good as journalism, but it's a user doing it. And for the vast majority of the time, we're never asking people to do that. There have been a couple of examples of citizen journalists becoming important to The Guardian, but that's not what we're there for. We're not asking people to do journalism, we're asking people to share user-generated content with us for us to do the journalism. We check things, we curate things, we work out what the story is from the things people give us. So it's important to point out, and maybe you lot kind of don't need convincing, but this isn't, user-generated content doesn't replace journalism, it's just another source of the stuff that we're looking at. So I thought that it would be useful for me to show you this video because it's been a year since we launched, and we made a little video recently to celebrate the things that we've achieved in the first year. And I just thought this was easier than me kind of wittering on forever. It's about 4 minutes, I think. I want to make it full screen, but I can't find the point.
The Guardian's, I think, at the forefront of experimenting with what we call open journalism, which is combining the best of what we can do as a traditional news organisation with the power of what the readers can do.
It's fantastic to have something like GuardianWitness, which is a user-generated tool. It's an app, allows people to send stories to us, send pictures, send images, send video, and allows them to contribute to our stories.
GuardianWitness is much more than just a set of tools. GuardianWitness is also a philosophy. It is the philosophy that no matter how specialized we are as journalists, that there is always someone who knows more on that topic.
It's not just news, it's music, film, books, sport, food, pets, everything. So what's important about GuardianWitness is that it has an impact on all areas of The Guardian.
This is the future of journalism that doesn't replace traditional journalism, but enriches traditional journalism.
It's really interesting for an organisation like ours to think about how we negotiate that relationship with the people formerly known as the audience, and how can we harness some of that creative skill and be a platform for it, and this seems a brilliant way of doing that.
when there were protests in Turkey, anti-government protests in Turkey last year. There was a blackout on Turkish media. So we had all this content that we could put straight into our live blogs, and people were coming to us again after again, day after day, telling their story of what was happening in Gezi Park and Taksim Square. And it really enabled us to see that story from people who were actually on the ground.
There was an assignment that was all around how people are dealing with cancer that have, acted as an enabler for niche communities to come together and get mutual support from each other and greater understand the world in which they are living in at that particular time.
We launched, I think, on the day of Lady Thatcher's funeral, and all the coverage in London was around, the pomp and the circumstance and the crowds along the Strand. And then Witness users started sending in pictures from around the country which told a very different story of empty town squares where there were these giant screens. And it's sometimes a good corrective to be reminded that things look differently elsewhere.
There was this one moment, I think it was during a demonstration in Catalan, on Catalan National Day in September, when one of our colleagues asked for contributions of that massive demonstration, and what came back were 4,500 photos and videos.
Every day the paper uses a weather picture from a reader, and it's proved to be a huge success, and the quality is great.
We set a challenge for people to create short animated films, and that was just leapt upon. The level of imagination that's gone into that is just extraordinary.
The readers can see all of the recipes as they come in, and they're looking at each other's and they're bouncing off each other. And I think that there's a real sense of community building up around Reader's Recipe Swap, and I think that's thanks to Guardian Witness.
The galleries have done really well. People really love it. They love to see how furry is your hamster. They love to see how noisy is your dog and how wet is your pet running across a beach.
When you work for an organisation like The Guardian, which is a global news organisation now with offices in America, offices in Australia, and a presence globally around the world, I mean, what a fantastic opportunity it is to leverage the passions, the interest, the perspective of those readers.
Guardian Witness is really important because any story is ultimately about people. And Guardian Witness gives us a way in which we can understand how these stories that we write affect the people that we're writing about. It gives us a much better approximation of what the whole picture is behind a story.
So, how does it work from our point of view? Let's have a look. Can you see this? So we have apps on the iPhone and Android, but most of our content doesn't come in through the apps. Most of it comes in through the desktop version, the website. On this site, this is a little bit separate from the main Guardian site. It's theguardian.com/witness, and it looks different from the rest of the Guardian site. We keep it separate so that it feels like it's the reader's own space. So people know that the things on here are not created by professional journalists, but they're the user's own content. And at any given time, we have various assignments. We call them assignments running where we're asking for particular input from our readers. And some of them are regular things like the travel tips competition we do once a week, recipe swap we do once a week, and then some of them are like news stories. So the red ones are the news stories. How will Australia's budget affect you? Because of course it's worldwide. It's not just the UK. Yellow is life and style, so something about libraries, and so on and so forth. So if you come to the Guardian Witness site, you can see all the different assignments we've got running at any given moment. But generally, our readers won't come in that way unless they're really kind of keen on Guardian Witness, which they've got really no reason to be, because we are a tool and we're a philosophy, as Wolfgang said, but we're not somewhere we're not like a social media site where we're trying to encourage people to come back for the sake of it. We want to do things for journalism's sake. So most people will come in through a web page on The Guardian. So they'll be reading a story about Afghanistan, for instance, and it will say, how has the Afghanistan war affected you? And they'll see this, and they'll click through on the blue button where it says contribute to this article. And then that will take them to the Guardian Witness site, and it'll ask them to contribute. an image, video, or piece of text. So say, for instance, you click on image, it gives you the option to upload a photo from your computer, add a title, which is like the headline that you see on the Guardian Witness site, add a description of the photo, which they can write whatever you ask them in the call-out article on the Guardian. You can ask them to address it in there. And then you have the option of them adding a geolocation information to their post. Most people don't do that, but if they've got it switched on their phone, for instance, then it will go in automatically unless they switch it off. Click on Contribute, and everything that comes in is then pre-moderated, so everything is looked at before it's published on the site. It comes into my team, so there's 3 of us who work on that, but there's also people around the Guardian who work on their own projects. We see everything, we look at it, we check it's okay. We don't check out every bit of information that they give us at every stage. We make sure it fits our community standards, which means things like there's nothing libelous or no contempt of court, no racism, sexism, that kind of thing. And as long as it passes those things, we then publish it on the Guardian Witness site. So this is within one of those assignments that you saw. This is one we started a couple of days ago, and so it's just the first few contributions have trickled in. So this isn't the final product. This is somewhere where people can see the things that they've uploaded and where people can browse each other's contributions. But this isn't our aim. This is just somewhere for people to see what's going on. Our aim is to make journalism out of it. So the next thing that will happen with this once it's closed, and because there's a month left on it, will be that someone will write up a piece about the stories that people have given us. They'll probably go back to some of them, interview them, might take a photo, might ask them for more information, that kind of thing. But we think of this as source material that would then create a story. One of our jobs then, when we want to take it from the stage of having it on Guardian Witness to using it in journalism, is verifying what's going on. And in some cases, we'll do this before we put it on Guardian Witness if we think there's a danger of that what we're doing is misleading. So say, for instance, in the video Caroline was talking about the Turkey protests last year, we wouldn't have wanted to put anything up that was misleading, that showed that there were millions and millions of people in a square, and it turned out it wasn't that place because it could incite violence or something like that. And so we would, depending on the sort of story, we would go to more or less effort to verify what we've seen. So the things that we'd be looking at would be the person who's contributed it. So we would decide whether we trusted the person. We would look at their history, so we can look up their username on the Guardian and see whether they're someone who's contributed regularly, whether we've trusted them in the past. We can look up their email address and their username across other social media sites. And if, for instance, they've got a long history of being on Facebook with the same name, and you can see they live in that place, that's more trustworthy than someone who's not got any presence on Facebook and has set up a Twitter account in the last 24 hours, for instance. Is it a credible location? So, for instance, if they're saying, here's me in Gaiety Park yesterday, and then on Facebook it says that they were drinking coffee in Las Vegas or something, then that would be less credible. Do they have the expertise to be saying the things that they are? And we might look on LinkedIn or something like that. But the most important thing is to talk to the user. So if we're not sure about something, or if it's something very important, we would always email them and say, what's your phone number? Can we have a chat? And that gives you a very good sense very quickly of whether you trust the person that you're talking to. The second question is, do you trust the content? And the most difficult thing the most common problem we have with content is people wanting to show us something important that's happening, but not having the content, not having the pictures themselves. And so they'll go on Google Images and find something that illustrates what they're trying to say, but it isn't their picture, it's someone else's copyright. And that happens all the time, and it's I get the impression it's very, very rarely through malice or through people passing it off, but they want to help us by showing us something, but we can't publish it and we can't use it. So every single photo that comes into us, even if it's just a picture of someone's dog, we would always search for it on Google reverse image search. So you can just drag an image in there and it pops up and you can see if it's appeared on other websites or not. So if it's something like a war zone or a protest, for instance, we would check the location. So we can look at the geolocation, not just what they put in the contribution themselves, but also in the EXIF data, in the metadata that comes with the photo. You can see sometimes if there's geolocation in there. You can see landmarks, road signs in photos. You can listen to the language being spoken. You can ask experts around the building who maybe know particular dialects of Arabic, whether it's the right accent for the area they say it is, that kind of thing. You're going to be checking the date on videos a lot of the time. There's a search engine called, I've forgotten what it's called. There's a good search engine for weather. Wolfram Alpha, that's it. And you put in Wolfram Alpha. You put in the place and the date, and you say, what was the weather like? And it will say, on the 5th of December 2012, it was cloudy. And if you can see that it was boiling hot, then you know that, and sunny, then you know it's probably not that day, for instance. Other people who are better at this than me will look at things like the length of shadows. Yeah, again, the most important thing is to talk to the user and find out where they were, when they were, how you can be sure that they were where they said they were. For instance, when we had the storms in October, someone sent us a picture of an enormous beach ball. It was like 2 or 3 times the size of a double-decker bus in Old Street in London, and it was just sort of bouncing around. And we thought, this is too good to be true. This is an amazing picture of a giant beach ball. And so the first thing we did was email the user and say, give us a ring when you can, we want to talk to you about your giant beach ball. But then we looked on Twitter and we found that around the time that he said it was 6:15 in the morning that day, and we looked on Twitter and we found that around 6:15 people were saying, good God, what's that? You know, and so we, around Old Street. So we knew that it was credible. And having talked to him, we figured out that it was exactly what he said it was. So all of these things have to happen before you can put something into the news. So, for example, here are some things that have turned into stories. We had an assignment on Syrian refugees. This has been a long-running assignment that we've had since we launched last year. Syria comes in and out of the news depending on things that have happened. But for refugees, this is something that's happening to people all the time, every day. But there's not always a good enough news peg to focus on those stories every day. So having this assignment is a really good way of getting content in on a very long period. When things are happening to individuals, we can kind of keep hold of them until there's something happening in the news where we can say, for example, there are these three refugees who had this happen to them. So that's been a useful assignment. And it's had loads of different output from it. So we had a blog on the Global Development site, which included this photo from an aid worker at Zatari camp, a gallery of refugees from different places, and then we had a blog post which explained how difficult it was to do journalism in Syria and how the aid agencies were taking their own photos and sharing their own stories with us. This was a story that I worked on that we were very proud of. It was a story that one of our news editors noticed that on social media a lot of people were saying things like, I'm really fed up with the fact that I walk down the street with my 3-year-old daughter and she says, Mummy, why has that woman got no top on? And you can see there's an advert with women in, not much clothes, that kind of thing. Or going into a shop and finding porn magazines and comics next to each other where they're not supposed to be. And lots of people were complaining about this, and it was starting to get a bit of momentum around the discussion on Twitter. And so our news editor said, well, we should capitalise on this kind of momentum and bring together these people who want to talk to each other. And so we put out an assignment asking people to show us photos of things they'd seen in public that they didn't want their children to see. We got an amazing response. So we published, you can see at the top, 217 contributions. There were some that we couldn't publish because they seemed too graphic, even though they had been in public. So like there was a really unpleasant T-shirt on sale in a high street shop that had a picture on it that looked very much like a rape scene, and it was very upsetting, and we decided not to publish it, even though it was something that people had seen with their kids. But the content that came out of this, we didn't just have a collection of pictures. It turned into the front cover story for G2. Zoe Williams, the journalist went back to a lot of the people who'd shared the photos with us, asked them their experiences, what had happened when they'd seen it, how they felt about it, all of that kind of thing. And she wrote quite an angry campaigning piece about the pornification of Britain's high streets, which was terrific. This was a project that we did through Culture, the Culture section. Your Most Precious Photo. We asked people to share their most precious photo with us, which I thought was quite ambitious because, you know, ask a national newspaper asking you to share something that personal seemed quite a big ask, but people really responded well and they sent us some incredible things. We had a gallery that came out of it. We had a beautiful spread, of a double-page spread in G2, and this was one of our favourites that came out of it. This is a reader's baby, Freddie, meeting his grandfather for the first time. So how do we encourage people to take part in these assignments? Well, I think it goes back partly to what I was saying about open journalism. It's finding things where our readers are going to know more than us. So we're not just asking people to send us things because they can, but because they have some kind of insight into something that we don't. We encourage our journalists to know what they want to get out of the assignment. So do they want photos because they're going to make a spread of photos? Do they want interviewees that they can go back to? Do they want contacts somewhere so they can find out something else later on? We encourage people to seed the assignment, and by that we mean give people examples of what we're looking for. Go to people who might want to contribute directly and say, we've got this assignment coming up tomorrow, have a think about what you might be able to contribute to us. And that often means going to experts and charities and people like that who have an interest in the topics that you're interested in. We encourage our journalists to remember that user-generated content is just one source of information. Some of the more old-fashioned journalists think of users' content as something a little bit separate, but there's no need. It's just one source of the stuff that you need for journalism. So it's quite good to mix it up with other things. So, for example, I did a project about protests in Venezuela, and we found that it was very easy to get people contributing through Guardian Witness who were taking part in the protests, but it was very difficult to get people to contribute who were not taking part because they were a different sort of people. And so we used Guardian Witness to get hold of the pictures of the protests, and then we used other traditional journalism techniques to find, talking to people, phoning people, to find people who were opposed to the protests. And then from a community point of view, as a community coordinator, it's really important to acknowledge the audience's efforts. So part of the reason that we have Guardian Witness as a platform, as a website, rather than just, say, an email address, is that we want people to get some immediate payback for contributing. They can see that their stuff's there, they can compare it to other people's, they can click on the recommend button, they can take the URL of the page and tweet it and say, oh look, my stuff's on the website. So that's an immediate thing, but also we email people a lot and say, this is terrific, and now it's gone in the paper. So every time, for instance, Roger was talking on the video about the weather pictures that happen every day we email people and say, your picture was in the Guardian today, would you like us to send you a copy? And that builds up people's kind of confidence, and it makes a big difference. People come back to us again and again. So, science. I know that a lot of you are interested in science. And what I'd like to do, when I've been through a few examples, I really like to hear your ideas about how something like this might be useful to your projects. So, like I said, we don't get structured data. If we want to do a survey or something, we would use something like Google Forms rather than Guardian Witness. But if there are things that involve case studies or illustrations or something where you're getting, say, a photo from different parts of the country, how could you use our readership in a useful way for your projects? Have a think about that, and I'll hopefully get some of you to suggest some ideas in a bit. Okay, so we haven't done very much with science, and that's partly why I'm here, because I really, really want us to do more with science. When there were the meteor showers in August, we asked people to share their images of shooting stars and fireballs, and we had some beautiful photos, a lot of beautiful photos actually. And we made a lovely gallery, but we also made a piece where one of our journalists went back to the individuals who'd taken the photos and said, oh, how did you get that photo? And what camera were you using, and did you have trouble with it, and what was the weather like, and do you have light pollution around your area, and all that kind of thing. And was able to write a little bit around each picture, so it was kind of like an interview. It was really interesting. This was a project I worked on with Guardian students, the student site, about students' mental health. We asked, there was around a time when there was a report saying that depression was a real problem in universities among students and academics. And we asked people to share their stories of mental health problems while they were at university, and asked how their universities had responded and supported them, and that kind of thing. And we thought that we'd get a few, but we thought as it's quite a personal topic, we would not probably get people opening up too much. But what we found was that we got hundreds of stories, and they were really powerful. A lot of them were really well written, very thoughtful, very personal. A lot of them gave their real name by mistake, so we didn't publish them. We went back to them and said, do you want us to publish them or not? And they went, oh no, I didn't realise I put my name on it. So we didn't have as many on the site as we might have done. But we were inundated with stories, and we literally couldn't get through them all. So we closed the assignment early. This is an example of one of the stories. Looking after my depression feels like babysitting a small child. And people were writing this length of content, which is much more than they write in a comments thread, for instance. So yeah, we eventually decided that we had to close the assignment early because we couldn't cope with the amount of stuff that was coming in, and we knew that we wouldn't be able to do it justice, because part of what we felt with this was that we had a duty of care to some of the people who were writing to us, especially the people who were currently experiencing problems or having suicidal thoughts. We wanted to make sure that we got through all of those and got back to the ones that it was really important to contact. So we closed it early and produced 2 pieces out of it. My colleague Libby wrote one, You Are Not Alone, Student Stories of Mental Health, which brought together some of the themes that came out of it and quoted from a lot of different students. And we opened a comments thread on that. And she also wrote another piece, Where to Get Help for Your Mental Health, which was like advice lines and that kind of thing, but that includes a lot of quotes from the students as well. But the comments that we got on that piece were interesting. We got a lot of criticism for closing it early because people found that it was a useful place where they felt safe writing about their experiences. What we'd hoped, because we'd never kind of worked on anything quite like this before, what we'd hoped was that whereas Guardian Witness is all pre-moderated, everything gets looked at, and we have to approve everything. With the comments threads, everything is post-moderated, so it's just a discussion until someone takes something down. And we thought it was a place where people would be able to talk to each other and support each other rather than us having to do that for everyone. And we found that it did not work like that. Guardian Witness was a place where people felt comfortable to write long passages about their personal experiences, and the comments thread was somewhere where they felt very exposed and in danger from other people. And there was one negative comment from someone very early on saying something like, I can't believe you're all moaning, at least you got to go to university, or something like that. And at that moment, it all stopped. Nobody said anything after that. And we realised that one thing that Guardian Witness brings that other places don't is that kind of feeling of safety. You're not going to get attacked. So it's got a lot of potential, I think, for these kind of stories. We worked on an environment story. After the storms in January, we asked, there are lots of different aspects to the storm story, and it carried on for weeks and weeks. There was all the flooding. But one angle we took on it was that a lot of the beaches in the UK had changed beyond recognition, and some of them were just disgusting. And people were writing to us and saying, my beach is horrible, but it's not a big enough story compared to the fact that the entire Wiltshire is underwater, for instance. And so we put our call out saying, how are your local beaches after the UK storms, and asked for photos. And by having lots of stories, it meant that we had a news story, as opposed to saying, we know that beach is dirty, we know that beach is dirty. That's not a news story. But if you can say all of these places have changed as a result, then you've got a news story out of it. So this is why it's important. Can you spot, the picture's called Exhausted Seal Pup Sheltering Among Mounds of Plastic Waste. Can anyone see the seal pup? Yeah, it's right in the middle. And actually, I printed out what the it was. Our reader Claire Wallerstein sent it in. She said, I run a local beach cleaning group and was asked by the RSPCA to go to try to locate an exhausted seal pup reported by a member of the public on Tregonhawk Beach, Whitshand Bay, South East Cornwall. What I found was this pitiful scene. Spotting the seal is almost like Where's Wally? It took us a little while. Our group removed about 400 sacks of rubbish from our beaches over the past 9 months, but the amount that has been spewed up from the sea recently is so massive that the task seems insurmountable. So people weren't just sharing photos with us, they were telling us stories about their personal experiences and about the things that were happening in their area that together built up to tell a story. But we still felt we weren't doing enough science, and so earlier this year we set up what we called the GuardianWitness Science Award, and we asked readers to make a short video about something in science that they loved. So the question was, what one piece of science do you wish everyone knew? Make a short film about your favourite bit of scientific knowledge, and you could win the GuardianWitness Science Award. And I thought, if we've got time, I thought, given that you'd probably be an appreciative audience, I would show you the winning video. We had a panel of judges, including Alok Shah, who's our science correspondent, and who else was there? I can't think. A really great panel of people, and I can't remember everyone. But just 2 minutes. Oops. Let's get it out of presenter mode, don't I? Sorry. That's all right. You have to get it onto the screen here.
Sorry, I'm doing it the wrong way around. It's confusing me.
Hi, I'm Ryan Jocks, and I'm here to talk to you about science, because science is everything! Science matters, and speaking of matter, what is it? Matter is everything that you can hit with your fist. This is matter, and so's this. And as a matter of fact, so is everything! Except for dark matter and antimatter. But how does it become all so hard and clumped together? Well, my friend, that would be mass. And what gives all these particles mass, I hear you say? That would be the Higgs boson. Let me explain. The beginning of the universe was much like this party. It got off with a bang. But then all the particles started flying around at the speed of light, ignoring each other, much like these cats. The Higgs boson, also known as the God particle, is a lot like me. And this fine bottle of European wine will help me demonstrate this. Only the best for my particles. The Higgs boson interacts with the particles, giving them the necessary mass they need to clump together. So, which one of you girls likes physics? Turning these particles into particles.
Thanks, Higgs boson.
No problem, just doing my job. And thanks to Higgs boson, I can do this. So, thanks mass, and thanks Higgs boson. Go science!
So we're quite happy with that. And finally, last year I ran an assignment called The Aliens Are Already Here. I noticed that a lot of our readers had shown us photos of things claiming to be aliens as a joke, but all through different assignments. And I just brought them all together and said, oh, it looks like we've already got aliens here. And so we had a picture of, have a look at my list. We had a picture of, this was just after the digital TV switchover at Crystal Palace, aliens landing. We had a picture of an extraterrestrial outpost at London Bridge. It was actually the Shard. And we had a picture of someone's cat that had accidentally got these bright eyes from the way the camera had taken the picture. And so we brought those together, and I said, you know, show us evidence that we've already got aliens on Earth. And then the science desk at The Guardian were really keen on this, and I was surprised that they trusted us with it, but it was really nice. And this was my favourite picture, and the caption, in case you can't read it from there, is, "They just stand and wait. I cannot leave my house. Trapped. Please, for the love of God, someone help me. I think they are making babies. Limbless, seeping, alien babies. We are doomed." So I was very pleased with that anyway. But we did get some people who were sending us things that they thought were serious, which was a shame. But we just rejected them. It was okay. So yeah, I wanted to ask you for your ideas, how you would like to work with The Guardian, because we're very, very keen to work with other organisations, with, you know, on science projects and all kinds of other projects. So kind of pitching us to you, what have we got? Well, we've got readers, we've got our readership, so we haven't got a random stratified sample of people, but we have got our, you know, readers. And we've got existing communities of people around the world who are interested in particular subjects around our content, and we're quite good at building up communities of people and finding those people. We have the tools, GuardianWitness, to accept the user-generated content. We have the journalism skills to check things out and make sure that they're right. And we've also got an outlet for the stories that come out of those things. And what we think you've got is questions that our readers could help you answer. So I was wondering, is there anything that you're working on at the moment or would like to work on that you think GuardianWitness might be useful for? Or any other kind of part of The Guardian? I'm interested to hear anything.
And there are microphones which you'll need to wait for. So.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I was just wondering, next year it's the European Year for Development, and each year there is a theme that the EU wants to promote. And development, of course, you would be having content as well as photograph, videos, and everything else from all over the world, and aid workers could be involved. People living in those parts of the world could be involved. Would something like that be of interest to you?
Yeah. How would it help you? How would it help you? That's what I'm interested in.
But the whole idea of a European year of something is to promote that theme, to develop, to raise awareness of both what are the problems and what we're doing about it. But the more people that get involved in sharing experiences, either things that went right or went wrong, the better it is. It just raises awareness.
Okay, so it's raising awareness. Did you want to talk at all about what you work on and whether there's kind of any, are there particular questions that you want to get that you want answers from our readers? Or is it more, sorry.
I'll explain. I work for the European Commission. I'm actually here as an academic visitor, and I just came to the lecture out of general interest. But it would seem to me a good way to make awareness on the issue, and also, I mean, interesting journalistic stories may come out of it. At the same time, you will raise awareness. At the same time, it will help us with what we are doing. So it will be sort of a win-win situation in a way.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just thinking off the top of my head, because I can't really speak for our academics, but I can think of one project in particular. So we have a very good migration studies institute, and I can see coming up this year they've got a few papers and a few launches where getting some personal experiences of migrants would be incredibly useful, because quite often when we have very stats-based reports, we don't necessarily have human stories to go alongside it, and I think that's where you can get a really good marriage of the fact base and then the human element.
I think that's a very good example. What I forgot to say about the student mental health project was that we then went to a charity and said, we've got all of these personal experiences and you've got all the stats, why don't we put the two together, and they're going to produce a report from it. So exactly, if you've got very statistic heavy data, then yeah, we can definitely do the other side and put the two together, and that makes news stories. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. You should put me in touch with them. Cool. Anything else?
I've got one actually.
Yeah.
So we periodically launch these citizen science websites, and this isn't so much science, but about science, I guess. Saying to people, well, how does this fit into your life? When do you do this? Why do you do this? Because we do get lots of conversation on the sites about the science itself, but I'm always intrigued as to what part of their life it makes up.
So what do you mean? What examples?
So I don't know. We launched one the other week about condors, and it's about watching California condors in their nests doing all this stuff. And you think, that's great, and all these people come along, thousands of them, and they take part, and they click on these pictures. And I'm sort of thinking, do they do this on the bus? Do they do this at home? Do they do it with their kids?
I see what
like, why is it part of their life suddenly, and what is it that attracted them to it? And to tell their story of their own active part of citizen science. So it's not so much a science story.
Yeah, but it's also going to be useful for you to know what it is that motivates people.
Sure.
I'm just going to write this down. Motivation for citizen science. I did see something recently. I don't remember who did it. I don't think it was The Guardian. Who did something about? No, it was The Guardian. It was The Guardian. That's my only source of knowledge. Did a piece on why people decided to help look for the aeroplane that had gone missing, because there was the crowdsourcing project of looking at all the pictures of the ocean, and so one of my colleagues did a piece on what people got out of that and what motivated them to do it. So I think that would, looking at that on different projects, I think would be very interesting and useful. Yeah.
Yeah, it would just be interesting, I think, as well, to hear a bit from you about how the sort of, if you like, the assignment process works with the wider editorial team. So do most of the ideas come from you and then you talk to journalists, or do quite often journalists, say, on the science desk, come to you and go, oh, I've got this idea? It'd be quite interesting to learn a bit about the inside track on that.
Well, it's always a conversation. So ideas can come from anywhere. When we launched Guardian Witness last year, I started at The Guardian last February, so I had 2 months before it launched, and I spent the 2 months going around to all the different journalists and saying, we're about to launch this thing, think about what you might want to do with it, we'll show you how to use it, we want you to get involved. So kind of evangelising. And some of them immediately got it and said, oh, I want to do this and this and this and this and this, can you help me set it up? And I was like, yes, and this is ways in which our readers might appreciate you going about it and, talking backwards and forwards and trying to find the best way of putting it together between us. And then some people took a lot more coaxing, so later on we would go to them with ideas and say, well, have you thought about doing this, have you thought about doing that? But as it's kind of settled down, it's now always a kind of two-way process. We have a lot of people coming to us every day. We get an email saying, we'd really like to do this. Can you talk to us about how best going to go about it? But it's always a discussion. We might say, well, we did something about that recently on this desk. It didn't really work because of this, so how about doing that? And oh, that's a good idea, so do that instead. But we also do spot things and come up with ideas. And sometimes it's, because we work across all the different desks, we're in quite a good position to encourage people to collaborate, which most people just work in little silos on their own topic. And we tend to know what's going on all around the building, which is really nice. And it's a bit of a lucky byproduct of what we do. But for instance, we realised that the Saturday supplement Cook, about recipes and things, and the gardening section, the two editors had never met each other, didn't know who they were, but they were both interested in allotments. So we got them together. So why don't we do a project about allotment? So So yeah, sometimes it comes from us, sometimes it comes from other people, sometimes it comes from outside organisations. So occasionally I'll meet someone at a conference, or someone will email me out of the blue and say, we're doing this project and we think it would work well with your readers. And we always follow those things up. Having said that, I've now remembered an email I haven't replied to, but it can come from anywhere, but it's always a discussion, because we've got people who know about their subject. So the journalists on the business desk or the science desk or whatever will know their subject and will know what their readers are interested in, but we know what appeals to, what gets people to participate. We know what kind of wording to use and what projects appeal to people. So between us, we come up with stuff. That's a very long-winded answer, sorry.
So we've just sort of stepped into more general questions.
Yeah,
have we interrupted your talk?
No, not at all.
Do you want to throw it open to even more questions to people?
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, so any questions at all then for Philippa about her talk? So I've got a couple actually, if you're not brave enough yet. Yes?
I was just wondering, hearing you, have you had cases where you went seriously wrong, despite the fact that you checked and double-checked the images and the stories, that you actually published something that wasn't true, and what happened?
Have we ever published it? As far as I know, fingers crossed, no. I think it will happen, because it happens to lots of organisations. Something will slip through, but we're very hot on verifying stuff. And so far, we've been very lucky. We have a system where you can report a problem with a post. So once or twice, people have flagged up something as not being what it says it is, but usually it's something where it doesn't matter from an editorial point of view whether it is or not. We think of it as the user's mistake, in the same way that you wouldn't correct a user, or wouldn't correct a reader who's written something factually incorrect in a comment. You wouldn't correct them in a piece of user-generated content unless you were putting it into an article and claiming it to be true. But no, we've been lucky so far. I don't know if it's mean of me to say or not, but he told me this in a public context anyway. But a colleague, industry colleague rather than Guardian colleague at the BBC, tweeted a picture of a dog and said that his audience member had said it was I can't remember, what was it? It was a really windswept dog. And we said, oh yeah, he said, oh, this dog's been caught up in the storm this week, and look at this funny dog. It was a nothing tweet. And it turned out it wasn't taken that week. It had been blown around in a different storm, and he was really embarrassed because that was his job. But that was a personal tweet, and it didn't matter. But those sorts of things are embarrassing when they happen, because you realise that you haven't checked something out properly. But we've been very lucky so far. That hasn't happened to us.
Can I ask you a related question to that, which was, you've got all these different topics and these different areas on which people have been able to contribute over the last year. And presumably there are lots of things where you get loads and loads of people, like that mental health one. But are there particular things that people don't want to share and don't want to talk about?
Yeah, lots of things. We're learning all the time. And some things we know aren't going to work, but we try them anyway, just to prove it. And some things we think are going to work, and they don't. So, for instance, last year, when it was the London Marathon, we ran a competition for everyone who was running the marathon. 15,000 people running for charity, and we thought of those 15,000 people, there are going to be some Guardian readers, and they're all going to be motivated to support their charity, because they're motivated to run a marathon, they're going to be motivated to support their charity. So we had a competition when we said, show us a 30-second video explaining why you're running for your charity. Best video will win £100 for their fundraising. And we thought this was a surefire winner. We had 7 entries, and out of 15,000 possible people, and I'd contacted about 60 different charities who had runners in the marathon to say, please can you tell your runners? And as far as I know, most of them told them, and they just didn't do it. And I think what we discovered quite early, at that point, was that people don't like taking videos of themselves. People like to share photos because it's much easier, because they can take the photo, see it, send it off. And also they like to share photos that they've already got on their phones or on their cameras, because they think, oh, I know about that topic, and I've got a picture of that, I'll share it. People, unless they're kind of campaigning on a topic like the sexualised imagery thing, or they're writing about their own experiences, they don't like to do something specifically for us. So making a video explaining something, unless they're the sort of person who's motivated by passion for science, for instance, they can't be bothered.
Any other questions? I nicked that question spot for myself. It's very rude.
I assume you don't pay your readers. Do they sometimes ask for money, and how do you react?
Well, we don't pay for things that come in through Guardian Witness because it's user-generated content. We're not commissioning things from people. We're saying, if you've had this experience and want to share it with us, we're here. But if people come to us and they have a story and we think, this is really important, we want them to write more about it, then we would always go through a proper commissioning process where we would go back to them and say, we'd like you, if you want to, we'd like you to write 800 words on this and we'll pay you the standard journalist fee for it. Also, if we make money out of a picture, if, for instance, ITN comes to us and says, please can we play that video that your reader shared of a van being swept into the sea, we will say, well, how much are you going to pay us for it? And then we give, I'm not meant to say how much it is because it's not a set amount. It's always negotiable with whoever we're getting the money from, but it's a really, really good deal for the reader. We're negotiating on behalf of the reader, so the reader wouldn't get any money if the other news organisation has just taken it, but we negotiate on their behalf to get money for them. So they would always be paid for something that we would normally get a fee for ourselves. If that makes sense. But yeah, people do ask us. And we have something on our website that says, if you're a professional photographer and you want to share things with us, you can, but if you're a professional photographer, you should be going to our picture desk and pitching your things to there because you need to be paid. We never, ever set up anything that we think would compete with professional photographer. So we would never ask for people to go to an event that we otherwise would have sent a professional photographer to. It's always about getting people in their own place rather than replacing journalists. And we have quite a strong ethical code on that.
But surely you have replaced some of your photojournalists to some extent. I mean, if you're using pictures from the public in the Guardian content, then are you not by definition replacing something that you would have previously been paying someone for?
No, because we would never, for instance, have had a journalist go to Edinburgh on the off chance that there was going to be no one in that square where the Margaret Thatcher video was, for instance. It's just someone passing through goes, oh, there's no one here, takes a photo. We would never have sent a journalist there because we wouldn't have known there was anything to take a photo of. We had a photo of the murder of Lee Rigby in Woolwich. We wouldn't have had a journalist there. It was someone on a bus. The beaches example, we wouldn't have known which beaches unless the people had come to us. But often we have audiences will show us things and then we'll follow it up with a professional journalist or something. So I don't think it is replacing anything, and I think that because most of what we do, not all of it, but a lot of what we do is online, it's kind of infinite. So we're often having a different perspective on a story. We might have the main news story and then a reader's version of it or something like that. It's very, I can't think of any example where it's directly taking a space that would otherwise have been professionally made.
So it's just new content that didn't exist before.
Yeah. And so one thing that people say is, oh, you're getting content for free from people. Well, we're getting content, but it's not for free. It takes so much work to work through things, and it's so much more work to get a piece of journalism out of non-professional content than it is from professional content. So it costs us more, I think, to use user-generated content than not to.
But we get the same in science. We get constantly, right. You'd be making everyone work for free, and are you replacing PhD students? No, we're not. So.
No. But we also feel quite strongly that that's an ethical point. We would not want to do that. So.
Anyone else?
Do you deliberately avoid political issues at the Guardian Witness? Avoid political issues?
No. So, for instance, you saw the clips of Catalan National Day. So that was all kind of, all the stuff we got in then was pro-Catalan independence. And we need at some point to kind of balance that out. But I think where politics comes into it is always through the personal experiences. So it's personal. It's, you know, how has politics affected you, rather than tell us your opinion on this stuff. So politics is kind of involved in an awful lot of things, but we don't say, this is a political issue, what do you think about it? Because that's not what we do. We do experience rather than opinion, I guess. So, so maybe it's not as overt in our call-outs, maybe. Does that answer your question? Okay. And we do a lot of things with protests around the world. So that, I guess that's quite head-on politics.
I'm just wondering if the UCG that you use has to meet the Guardian's editorial code as well as your community participation guidelines, or just one?
It doesn't. If it's readers' content, then as long as it's on Guardian Witness, then we're not saying this is correct fact, this has all been checked out. Although we don't put up stuff that we think would be problematically misleading. So not in the sense that, no, it doesn't have the same journalistic standards by any means. It's just content. But when it moves to become part of our editorial content, yes, absolutely, we have to check things out, and it would have to meet our standards. So in the worst case scenario, if something seemed important but we couldn't entirely be sure it was right, we might say something like, our reader told us about an experience they said they had, or something like that. We'd try and put it in a nice way, but we would try and say that it was something that someone had told us rather than the fact. But if we check things out, we would say so. But almost always we would not use something in an editorial piece unless we were sure of it.
Sorry for another question.
Sorry?
How do you deal with photographs from demonstrations that, I mean, a reader sends a photograph of a group of people in a demonstration and protecting the rights of the other people that, in the photograph?
We look at it on a case-by-case basis, so depending on where the demonstrations are. So if it's a situation where we think that people who are being photographed might be in danger or under pressure from a government, say, as a result of being pictured in The Guardian and they're not aware of it, then we wouldn't publish it. So anything where we think that someone's identifiable in a situation where they haven't chosen to be identifiable and it's going to be a problem for them, we would just reject it and not publish it. But if it's somewhere safe-ish and it's in a public place and people walking past could see them anyway and they're making no, or if they're looking directly at the camera, or it's kind of judging it on a case-by-case basis, then if it seems like there would be no harm to that person by publishing it, then we would publish it. But we look at everything and we talk to each other and we say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? You know, and we talk to other journalists and say, you know this area better than us. What do you think? You know, what do you think to that? So, yeah, it's something we think about.
Okay, well, with that, I think we're done with question. I'm just checking. This is your last chance. Okay, because I think we've asked lots of questions. I think they've been good questions. Well done, you lot. Thank you very much. That was a really great talk, and I learned a lot. And I'm going to quiz you lots afterwards. But yes,
and I was going to say, if you do have ideas for things you want to do with us later on, just give us a shout, because we're always looking for new projects and new people to work with.
Okay, great. So let's say thank you to Philippa.